We hear a lot of perspectives on the Mankind podcast. Inclusion of a guest is not an endorsement of their views, and the opinions expressed here do not always represent the mission or values of the Mankind Project USA.
Two men walk into a podcast interview with ADHD. What happens next? Well, you wouldn't have guessed it was going to be the shortest episode in the Mankind podcast history. Now, I am pleased to introduce Dr. John Torrens today to come in and talk about how we with ADHD can harness its superpowers and minimize some of the downsides that we experience. Now, you might be thinking right now, well, I don't have ADHD, and that may very well be the case. Or you may be like me, someone who found out in their 30s that they actually have it. Now, whether you have full-blown tip in the Richter scale ADHD or just some of the tendencies, any one of us can get a lot of value out of the conversations we're going to have today, talking about health span versus lifespan, how we can optimize the moments in each day, and how we can take care of our bodies for longevity and success in the long run. So you're going to love this interview with Dr. John Torrens. This is the Mankind Podcast. G'day and welcome to another live episode of the Mankind Podcast, the show where we break the molds of modern manhood to prove there's more than one way to be a man. Now, I am very excited to share today's guest with you, Dr. John Torrens, who is an award-winning professor of entrepreneurial practice and three-time Inc. 5000 entrepreneur. He is a healthcare and education entrepreneur with 25 years leading high-growth companies and is an active member of the Young Presidents Organization. He is also a faculty member of the Syracuse University Whitman School of Management's Department of Entrepreneurship and Emerging Enterprises, and he joins us today to talk about how those who are impacted by ADHD can harness their condition to win in all facets of life. Dr. John, welcome to the show, mate.
Brandon, thank you so much. Great to be here.
It's a pleasure. So I actually came across you through my own journey of identifying through some of the mental health practices that I engage in around adult ADHD. It just opened a whole new world for me that has shone a light on 31 years of life thus far. Initially quite uncomfortable and, a lot of shame. I'm not a big fan of labels. I prefer to empower myself and not buy into labels and things like that. And your video gave me a sense of solace, your TED Talk specifically, to go, man, it makes sense how my first business in my 20s did what it did, grew to where it could grow. And then subsequently, it makes sense how I burnt out and sold it for pennies because I just needed to get out of it. Mm-hmm. So give us for those that haven't heard of you, give us a little insight into your own journey, how you found yourself in this place of being able to take what many would deem a disability and reframe it into a different ability.
Sure. Happy to. So like you, it sounds we had a similar path. I didn't realize that I had this diagnosis until I was growing my company. We were going along pretty well. I got to the point where I had about 10 employees, and I realized that people were just having a hard time with the way I worked, right? Like I would, for example, we would spend all day in a strategic planning session. Everybody would know what we're doing. They'd know the direction we were going. And then the next day at the water cooler, I would just off the cuff say, hey, you know what would be really cool if we did this? Just saying that we should think about it, right? In my mind. But in everybody else's mind, they're like, well, we just spent a whole day planning the next year, and now you're talking about doing something different. What's going on, right? And it would confuse people, it would frustrate people, and it just played out with with various aspects of dysfunction within the company. One of my employees suggested that, hey, maybe I should see somebody about ADHD. And at first, I just kind of laughed it off. But when I realized that it was affecting our company or my company, I went and saw somebody. And, the psychiatrist's first reaction was like, well, you didn't just develop it as an adult. You've had it your whole life. So, we did this whole process where I had to call my parents and get my elementary school report cards, right? So he could look through them. And it was quite shocking. Like the most common comment by all of my teachers was like, hey, John would be a great student if he would just focus, or if he would just apply himself, or you know,
apply himself. Good Lord, that's giving me PTSD.
Right. And, so I guess, I'd had it. And I remember, as we were reading these comments, all these things started to come back, right? Like, just the, not difficulty I had in school because I was bright, but I couldn't sit still. I just couldn't follow the program. So, that it all came together at that point. So once I got the official diagnosis, I tried medication, didn't really work too well for me. Although I don't want to discourage anybody from going that route, because for some people it can be profound, but for me,
Sure.
It just didn't work out very well. But I was able to come up with some compensatory strategies and just, sort of made light of it and was a little bit self-effacing about it. And eventually everybody got on board and say, oh, that's just the way John operates. And I did always have somebody around me who was kind of like the regulator, right? So they were like the interpreter, or the person who would tell me, hey, your ADHD is acting up, it's going to freak people out, calm down, or yeah, that's a good idea, but how would we actually execute that? So somebody just to act as that, strong number two, a governor or regulator type of thing.
If I'm thinking kind of traction, entrepreneurial operating system, it's like you're the visionary,
Mm-hmm.
right? But you need that person that can condense the mania and bring it into a clear, clearly communicable order or direction.
Right.
And
exactly.
See, similar, but it's my wife who's like, excuse me, what? We want a sauna now when we just spoke about saving for this. And
right.
So I understand her frustrations when I'm like, pew, pew, shiny objects show up left and right. And
right.
So, but there is an inherent positive to it. And it sounds like it's up to the individual to really identify and perhaps reframe the condition to, well, you know what? My brain is structured differently. It works differently. So what works for me? So I want to ask, what worked for you? What did you discover? Because like you, the medication stimulants just don't agree with me so much. I found it through exercise, meditation, getting steps in, scheduling sprints, as well as downtime. What have been some of your strategies that you learned to implement that have helped you maintain the ability to play well with others in business?
Right. Well, all the things you mentioned for sure, and I'll touch upon those in a second. But the main thing for me was just the recognition that it's a two-sided coin. So I like to use the example of, the basketball player Yao Ming, right? Super tall guy, 7 foot plus. So as a basketball player, being 7 foot tall, super functional, right? There's a lot of advantages to it. There's also a lot of advantages to being 7 foot plus if you're in pedestrian traffic or at a concert or a music festival or a sporting game or something like that. But if you're 7 foot plus and you try to sit in a regular sized conference chair or lay in a hotel bed, it's highly dysfunctional and uncomfortable. So the exact same trait, being 7 foot plus, can be functional in one setting or dysfunctional in another. And that's the analogy I like to draw with ADHD. So the outcome of the research was basically that in the context of entrepreneurship, ADHD can be very advantageous, very functional, but there's also a negative side of it as well. So if you think of, and by the way, this really only applies to hyperactive and impulsive ADHD. So if you think about the diagnoses or the traits, right? So this idea of high propensity for risk, when it's harmful or dysfunctional, it looks like you're just reckless and taking wild risks without thinking through the mitigation. But when it's functional and it's working for you, it makes you look like you're brave and visionary, right? So it's just two sides of the same coin. Another one of my favorite is, one of the classic symptoms of hyperactive or impulsive ADHD is what they call lack of premeditation or low premeditation, right? So you don't think things all the way through. So when it's dysfunctional or not working well, it makes it look like you're rushing decisions or making bad decisions or just not thinking about them. But when it's working for you, you look like you're fast acting, fast thinking, and jumping on opportunities before anybody else can. So the good side of the coin, the functional side, has a lot of advantages, especially in the context of entrepreneurship. But the other side of the coin can lead to all the negative aspects of an ADHD diagnosis that we know, losing your job, poor performance ratings, divorce, infidelity, bankruptcy, all those negative things. So for me, it was just a matter of being able to recognize kind of what side of the line my traits were that day, right? So if I was being, if I had this high sense of urgency, which is another trait, right? It could make me look like I'm overly impatient, or it could make me look like I'm really productive. So when I'm feeling a high sense of urgency, just understanding how that is perceived or how that's showing up for my employees and my team and that sort of thing. So that recognition was critical for me.
So the recognition alone, I see, for me, it was like life, just 31 years, just smacked me between the eyes. I went, whoa. I heard all those messages of doesn't apply himself.
Yeah.
As a young person, the shame that I internalized that to mean, because I knew that when I was focused, I could do ungodly amounts of things in short periods of time. I've learned that since having a child. They're napping. Oh, watch me.
Right.
This could be a 30-minute nap. This could be a 2-hour nap, and I'm gonna treat it like a 30-minute nap.
Right.
And so, yeah, the recognition alone was like, could take a breath and go, man, like, okay, so it's not just a character flaw. I'm not just lazy. It's not that I have my priorities in the wrong places. There is a chemical as well as structural difference in my brain than the average person.
Absolutely. And it's unfortunate because the public health system isn't really optimally set up for us, right? Normally the march toward medication, yes, and it can be super helpful for some people. But in my experience, it seems to be set up for the advantage or for the convenience of the adults in the room, right? So let's medicate the kid so he could sit there and pay attention through the lesson, get his homework done on time and not be disruptive. And I understand it's hard to differentiate instruction when teachers are already, overworked and they have a lack 100%. Of resources. So I'm not blaming teachers by any means. I mean, no. I've been blessed with amazing teachers who recognize this in me and tried their best to help. But we're not operating in an educational system that's optimized for us specifically. So you get into it causes a lot of mistaken beliefs, like I'm not smart enough, I'm not good enough, I'm too dumb or whatever it is, right? But inside, that these things aren't true, right? Because when you actually studied for a test, or when you had an assignment that you were interested in and liked, you crushed it, right? Or if there was, like, I remember the fundraisers, right? Hey, go sell raffle tickets for our school trip. I would kill it. Like I would be the top seller or whatever, right? So when it was something I was really interested in, I could do really well. But if I wasn't that interested in it, I just didn't pay attention to it, right?
I remember going to university and the preliminary subjects, at business school, you have to do all of them before you can specialize. And I remember my accounting and governmental regulations classes. Fortunately, I had a good relationship with my lecturers. I'm pretty sure they pushed me across to that 47.2% pass. I passed by 0.1, but marketing, I got the top grade in the whole cohort because that's something I was very intrigued and interested in. So it's so true. And I think also not just the educators that have a hard time, it's the parents that perhaps they're a single parent managing a lot of kids, or dual parents, even dual income, but there is so much going on. It's really hard to attune to the needs of the individual child. What's up, everyone? Brandon here, and I want to tell you, the busy professional, the dad that's juggling multiple tasks and duties, I want to tell you about something that has transformed my mornings, and it is Magic Mind. Now imagine having energy all day for work, dad duties, and perhaps some to spare in the evenings. A couple weeks ago, I was hitting that afternoon crash hard. The 2 p.m. blues were the soundtrack to my life, and then I got a hold of Magic Mind. Now, this is not just any supplement. It has been developed over 10 years by doctors and researchers with over 200 studies backing its ingredients. Now, this tiny little powerhouse of a shot uses premium nootropics and adaptogens, and thanks to the advanced nano encapsulation, it absorbs 5 to 10 times faster than any other pill. Now, since adding Magic Mind to my routine, I'm more focused, calm, and that energy sustains all day without the caffeine crash. It's safe, scientifically validated, and it helps me and my wife stay sharp and stress-free. So if you are ready to upgrade your day, head to magicmind.com and use the code Unchained20. That's Unchained20 at checkout to get 20% off your subscription. Now you can find those links in the show notes. That's magicmind.com, and at checkout, use the code Unchained20. When you support our sponsors, you support our show. So I appreciate you as always, and trust me, you will thank me once you get a hold of this stuff. Something that has come up in some of the research I've been doing is the same way that, John, do you have children at all?
I do. I have 2 kids. Yeah.
You have 2 kids. Okay. So in the same way that you want to be proactive in educating your children around their bodies, right? Around sex in a healthy way, not leaving it in the hands of educators to have to do that. You know, you can proactively, I can help my daughter by proactively helping her know her body so well that no one can take advantage of it because she knows it so well, right? Yeah. The same way that we can educate our kids who have ADHD to identify, hey, your brain works a little different than others. And so just being able to give them that rather than make them feel out of the regular group, it's bringing them in to go, here's your superpowers. Here's how you can use them. And I thank my parents every day for putting me in gymnastics because I feel like that is a kid with ADHD's dream. Trampolines, foam pits, bars, jump really high, jump off that. And no wonder I was able to build a career in gymnastics because it gave me a singular focus, something to obsess over.
Absolutely. You know, I feel same way with surfing. So I'm an avid surfer. I live in Costa Rica part of the year. And when you're out there in the water, you have one thing to focus on. And I find that so liberating and I love it, right? I mean, you have to be focused. Much like, you're flying through the air as a gymnast. You're navigating waves and conditions as a surfer. You do have to be focused, and it's harnessing that ability to hyper focus on things because it's not that we can't focus, but when we do focus, we can hyper focus. So it is interesting to have that, and it's super helpful in my experience.
I remember when the waves were packed. I'm from the Gold Coast in Australia. I'm not sure if you're aware. It's like
sure,
it's a big surf spot. Yeah. And, we'd have some like 2-foot shoreys dumping that, so for those listening, those are waves that are dumping right on the sand, basically. And you got a full lineup of surf. So you're looking left and right. Are you dropping in? Is someone's dropping in on you? And make sure you don't land on your head. Right. and it was amazing in those moments to be in such a flow state. And to be able to be aware of all of it as it was happening, where perhaps someone without ADHD might, have a different experience.
Yeah. And so when I'm in Costa Rica, I always start my day in the water by surfing, right? I'm up at, 5:30, I'm in the water by 6. And the ocean is literal energy, right? You get energy from the movement of the waves. And I find when I go back to my office and I start working, so much more productive, so much easier to focus because I've already had that movement, that activity, that, adrenaline rush. And now I can, I've done really what I wanted to do that day. Now I can do all the other stuff that I kind of need to do.
Beautiful. Kind of gives you a foundation to start the day from.
Yeah. And you're grounded. You've got the earth's energy. You're in the water. You're in the sand. It's an amazing thing. So, and it doesn't have to be surfing or gymnastics, right? But some sort of movement activity to get that dopamine going, super important. So actually back to your question before about what I found works. So I kind of look at it as, again, 2 sides of the equation. So there's the consumption, and then there's, the output, right? So what am I taking into my body? Not just food and drink, right? But I mean, we know there's things like you can't add things to your diet to help your ADHD symptoms, but you can remove things, right? Yes. Like sugars, caffeines, dyes, alcohol, processed food, all that kind of stuff. So just making sure what you're bringing into your body is healthy. Similar alcohol consumption, it's, the science is pretty clear that there's really no safe, effective dose of ethanol. It's just bad for you. And if you take a drink, you're basically agreeing to have poorer sleep that night than you would otherwise. And for me, the ability to have good sleep and wake up, having a good REM, good deep, good, all my cycles be, adequate and optimal. That's important for me. So what am I consuming in my mouth, but also through my eyes and my ears, right? What kind of media am I consuming? So I used to be the guy that had, 3 screens when I was working with, you've got Facebook Messenger on one, you've got WhatsApp, you've got your stock ticker, you've got Outlook. I mean, everything, right? So no matter what was going on, something was drawing your attention one way or the other, and you couldn't get through a task. So even that kind of consumption, what kind of media information are you consuming? What are you listening to? What are you watching? That sort of thing. And then there's the output. So are you doing something on a daily basis that fulfills you or gets you moving and gives you that dopamine? Surfing, gymnastics, running, cycling, whatever it is, doesn't matter. Just do something. Also, from a work perspective, are you doing things that are uniquely suited for you? So for me, there's things that I hate doing. Anything that has to do with like minute detail, I will procrastinate and put it off until I finally have to do it, or at the last minute, give it to somebody else. Say, hey, would you do this for me? Right. But if it's a creative project, or if it has to do with thinking about new opportunities or new markets or something like that, I'm all over it. I'll obsess about it and I'll really enjoy it. So are you doing not only the movement, but are you doing the work related things that you're really good at? And a lot of times as men, as founders, as CEOs, we think we should be good at all that, right? We're the CEO. We've got to be able to do everything. We've got to lead by example. Part of leading by example is delegating the things that you're not good at to somebody else who is really good at it, because there are people who are amazing at the things I'm terrible at, and I should just give that to them, right?
Yeah.
And then you also mentioned meditation. Super important. It helps you focus on focusing, right? Or pay attention to how you pay attention. Really great practice. My daughter just got me one of those Muse headbands for my birthday. And so I've been working with, at first I was like, I don't know if this is going to be helpful, but I've loved it. Just having biofeedback, because like sometimes you meditate and you're like, I don't know, is this really doing anything? I'd love to see what's going on inside my brain. Now all of a sudden I've got this, cool visual feedback on how I'm doing. So I love it. And I've been hooked up to sensors for the past couple of years, a continuous glucose monitor, a lumen for my breath, you name it, I've got it. Or a ring, Whoop band.
So getting, I know how it is. So getting diagnosed with ADHD is a health hacker's dream, really, because then you can go so deep into all these different things. It's interesting. There's a couple things there. I'm curious, I want to get your thoughts on this. The way that we look at smoking now, I have a feeling the next generation is going to look at drinking the same way.
Totally. Yeah.
Like, what are you doing?
Yeah. And, but it's so ingrained in the fabric of our society, right? Everything, for a celebration, to relax, vacation, anything has to do with alcohol, right? And it's very socialized. It's acceptable to advertise it. I haven't stopped drinking. I still will once in a while. But when I don't, it makes the people I'm hanging out with fairly uncomfortable. Like they can't, they don't understand it, or they're not down with it. So, usually what I do is I have a club soda with a little grapefruit juice in it. Looks like a cocktail. Or I actually started finding some non-alcoholic beers that are not bad. Yeah. And I've got some, the spirits, like Ritual Zero Proof and, that kind of thing. Seed Lip. Actually kind of, because it gives you the routine of making cocktails and it's fun. Yeah. But I agree. I think future generations are going to look back and say, okay, so you guys were knowingly ingesting a known neurotoxin. Well, what was wrong with you guys? Right? Yeah.
We've been practicing a new rule in our household is, so previously it was like, okay, no drinking on weekdays. We'd give ourselves Wednesday. And now it's, we don't drink crap booze. Like plain and simple. No Mick Ultras going down this gullet. Like it's, it's the local craft beer that supports the local economy. It's like good bourbon, because we're in bourbon country here in Tennessee. So, so that at least I know allows me to kind of still keep my whistle wet a little bit.
Yeah.
But I'm sure I could totally see us just ditching it entirely at some point. And like the sleep, maximizing, what we're putting in our minds and our bodies before we go to sleep. And I feel like that's the best way to win the day as someone with a hyperactivity disorder is to win the evening. Is to make sure that, because no one has burned more mental calories, I think, than us.
Yeah,
in that wake cycle.
Yeah. So, I started wearing the blue blocking glasses at night when I'm looking at screens. I start my, sleep hygiene, routine about an hour before bed. It's a little bit obsessive, but it just works really well.
Sure.
So in terms of, like, so like a really good thing for the audience, for the mankind audience, we tend to encourage entrepreneurs to grind and work and literally kill themselves for their businesses, right? But the problem with that is, actually a good friend of mine gave me the example. He's, because this was me a number of years ago, right? Just not paying attention to my health. I was getting fatter, getting sicker, slowly but surely. A friend of mine said, "Hey, you're working so hard. That's great. Your wife's next husband is really going to appreciate all the wealth you created after you died." And I was like, that's a really good way to look at it, right? So we encourage founders to grind and work hard, right? Because that's what proud founders do, right? As a man, founder, CEO, and even women suffer from this. But for men, yes, we're encouraged to do this. It's this hero worship. We're idolized for doing it. However, we're just killing our health span. And so I've been focusing a lot on health span over lifespan, right? Because modern medicine is really great at keeping you alive longer with chronic disease, but they're not really good at preventing and helping you stay, alive and vibrant long into life. And for me, as a guy who's trying to, build businesses and create wealth, it doesn't make sense to kill myself so I can't enjoy the fruits of those labors in my final couple decades, right? Because I might be dealing with chronic disease that could have been largely managed or prevented. So that's been a real focus. And I've been trying to work with my students a lot more on that because they have this hero worship that's kind of dysfunctional, right? So I've been trying to
hustle culture.
Hustle, absolutely. Yeah, there's a whole name for it.
The whole culture around hustling. I get it. So just quickly before, I want to dive into that a little bit more. But for those listening, you heard lifespan, you heard health span. So the distinction between the two, my understanding is lifespan, you can live to 100 years old. That's your lifespan. Health span is how much of that time are you actually capable of moving, putting luggage in overhead compartment, pulling yourself out of a pool, being able to carry your groceries up a couple flights of stairs. So you can live to 100, sure, but would you rather live to 90, knowing that up until 90, you could still move, you could still drive a car, you could still wipe your backside? That's the game now. I see my wife and I, we're 31 and 33. So we're planning now to make sure that we are living to 150 one day with what we're doing now. And so that is the goal. You have these young people coming up in entrepreneurship, in education, and they're watching the Gary Vaynerchuks. They're watching these ambitious, interestingly, Gary's message has changed a lot since when I was coming up in business. But they're watching these people who are basically like sacrifice everything for success, sacrifice everything to make the money, get the car, get this and that. But it's a dangerous game. I mean, I can share that myself. I had 6 employees when I was 25 and we had a rocket ship strapped to the business and I was miserable, absolutely miserable. And I burnt out hard. I had pneumonia for I had the flu for like 3 weeks and I couldn't get out of bed. And it just wasn't worth it. I was wasting my best years when as my mentor says, I should be out there rooting, drinking and drugging. If you don't do that, in your 20s, you're going to turn 40, buy a Harley Davidson or a Mazda Miata, cheat on your wife and ruin everything. So it's just kind of redefining what is success, right? Is success just how big your company is, or is it your ability to enjoy it and show up as a father, as a husband, as a leader, and be balanced in all ways? But I think the way you described health span versus lifespan is right on. And, my new goal is I don't necessarily have a target for how long I want to live. I just want to live as well as possible right up until I die. So if I could compress that period of morbidity, so I'm healthy, and then dead, that would make me happy, right? Because who wants to spend your last 10 years being a burden to your family, using up all your resources in the healthcare system, not being able to have fun, and just kind of, taking up space? I don't want to do that. I want to be able to do the things I really like to do right up until I'm gone. And that's what I keep focusing on. That's what I think about. And hopefully I'll be, manifesting that into reality as I get older. I mean, I just turned 56, and it's been a
I feel much more healthy and younger than I did a decade ago. So I do this little sprint triathlon close to my home, and my goal is to get a little bit faster each year, which I have for the past 3 years. So,
Wow.
if I could advance into my 60s and shave a couple seconds off here and there, I'll feel like that's a huge win,
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Well, mate, wouldn't have guessed 57 or 56. I'm not blowing smoke, by the way. You're doing a lot right. So thank you for setting a good example for your students and for your kids and for those that are learning from you, because we need more role models like that are teaching these messages. Because, even just my generation, certainly my parents' generation, it was just like they were in the yuppie era. So it was like if your car didn't have a phone in the center console, like you weren't
Right.
measuring up. And a lot of that trickled down, and I'm happy to hear that we're catching it. We're starting to catch it now and identify that there's far more to life than just material wealth or success. And if we can each define that for ourselves, and I think how that relates to ADHD is to also manage expectations differently. To go, it's easy for me to have a to-do list this long. Like that is the easiest part of my day, is making that to-do list.
Yeah.
Easy. But being able to go, okay, but as far as like, let's really boil it down to the simple parts here. Sure, if I achieve all this, great. But have I spent that quality time with my daughter and my wife? Have I exercised? Right? Have I put good food in my body? Have I hydrated? So maybe instead of focusing on the to-do list, prioritize the stuff that makes it all possible. And then just limit those expectations on what I could get done in a day.
Right. Oh, you hit it right on the head. And so what can you get done? Right. And then you think about, well, why am I doing all this? And at the end of the day, what we all want, everybody on the planet wants the same thing. You want to be happy. You want to have meaning. You want to feel love. I mean, that's what you want. Right. So if we all want to be happy, we have to assume the things we're doing every day are so that we will be happy. So hard grinding, hustle culture entrepreneurs are like, I'm going to bust my butt so I can grow the business, so I can have a good income, so I'll be happy, right? So the happiness is always just over there. You got to chase the happiness, right? I got to finish this to-do list so I can get this contract so I can be happy. The cool thing is you can skip all that and just go to being happy. Like you can literally decide right now that I'm happy, right? You can have a gratitude practice and sit here and say, hey, you know what? I'm warm. I've got a roof over my head. I've got a beautiful view. My wife and I have a great relationship. I'm happy. And forget about all the other stuff, right? Because if the goal is to be happy, get right there, and then it's amazing what happens with the rest of the stuff. You look at the to-do list and say, well, I don't know, is that really going to lead to my happiness, or is that going to lead to fulfillment, or is that going to give me any satisfaction? Right. So, and it's not to say you can't do hard things. Like doing hard things is very satisfying. But just understanding like, hey, all the stuff on my to-do list is there for a reason. And the underlying reason is so I'll be happy, because I think success will bring me happiness. Why don't I just feel the happiness right now that is already inside of me?
I'm so happy you said that. So much happy you said that. I mean, so in my coaching practice, it's so easy. When I had my gym, it was really easy to make people feel putrid about themselves and use that energy to like have a massive transformation, right? But it's dirty energy. At the end of the day, it's like coal as opposed to a renewable, clean energy source. And something I do with my clients from the jump is let's take stock of everything that's working. Because if you're trying to make a big transformation, let's not throw everything out. What is working right now. And it's amazing to see people day one come to this place of like, man, I am living the dream. It's like, great. Now from that place, what's possible? This is the long game we're playing here. Not some short sprint where you can do a bunch of things, but get clear on who you are beneath it all to then go forward and achieve the things that you want to achieve.
Yeah, for sure. And if you believe that thoughts have vibrations, which they do, right? I mean, that you want to vibrate at that frequency of gratitude and happiness and that sort of thing. So yeah, absolutely. And I love the analogy of the clean versus the dirty energy. That's that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it's an 80-20 principle. I mean, I look at it like light side, dark side, because 20%, like, sometimes you just got to get pissed off. Like sometimes good to just like,
we're human.
The injustices of the world, like, overcome the philosophical problems and you know what, like, don't get stuck there though. Don't get stuck there, because not a lot of good can happen playing the long game. Yeah. Well, John, it's just been an absolute pleasure spending this time with you. And what do you know? To all the ADHD haters out there, 31 minutes. This is a Mankind podcast record.
I didn't check my phone once the entire time. It was amazing.
Fantastic. Well, mate, I certainly hope this isn't the last time we get to spend time together, because I can already tell the next conversation, if I had more of your time, would be like, let's dive into how to strike that balance between entrepreneurial and professional endeavors and achievement, and also maintaining that harmony with home life, family life, relationships, and other things. So I'm sure there's a thread that we can pull at a later point. But for now, how can our listeners find out more about you, so I can put all those links in the show notes?
Yeah, sure. So the best way to find me is just on LinkedIn, John M. Torrens. I've got a website, which I think is down right now for a little maintenance, but it's Dr. John Torrens. That should be back up in about a week or so. Mm-hmm. You can find my book on Amazon, and it's called Lightning in a Bottle: How Entrepreneurs Can Harness Their ADHD to Win. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, I'm going to make sure all those links are in the show notes. And mate, what an absolute pleasure. So I want to thank you for being here to share your wisdom and your experience with us. And of course, I want to thank you, the listeners, who join us each and every week, where we bring in these experts to find different ways that we can show up better as fathers, as husbands, as sons, as uncles, as brothers, as citizens, because that's what we're doing here. We're proving that there is more than one way to be a man. What do you say, John? Have we done that today?
Yeah, I think so. And I love what you're doing. I love the mission, the message. It's super important. So right on. Thank you.
Hear, hear. Lots of love. We'll see you next week.
All right, Brandon.
This has been another episode of the Mankind Podcast, produced in association with the Mankind Project USA. We have been your hosts, Boyson Hodgson, and myself, Brandon Clift, and we want to thank our guests for joining us today and imparting their wisdom from their experiences in this amazing journey called life. If you want to find out more about today's guests and support them in their mission, you can find links to them in the show notes. Now, if you have found gold and insights that you believe could benefit your loved ones and those you care about, be sure to share it with them. And of course, we are always grateful for a rating and review of the show on iTunes. Now, above all else, we've got to thank you, the listener, because through your attention and your support, you have made it possible for us to let men all over the world know that they are not alone and that there is more than one way to be a man. And if something in this episode has touched you, then perhaps it is the call to action to get involved in men's work. With live trainings happening constantly and in-person trainings happening all over the world, the Mankind Project definitely has something for you. Now, if you've enjoyed the music in this episode and all of our episodes, be sure to check out Jim Donovan and the Sun King Warriors. I have links to them in the show notes. And lastly, just know, what it means to me to be a man is completely different than what it means for you. That is the beauty of this journey. So if you are looking for guidance, support, and community as you begin to unpack and dive deeper into your men's work journey, then you know where to find us. Same place, same time, next week. Lots of love. We'll see you then.
Hey, it's Boyson here with the Mankind Podcast. We are closing in on 100 5-star reviews of this podcast, and we have a goal. Brandon and I want to get to 250 5-star reviews. So help us out, will you? Please go to the Mankind Podcast on Apple Podcasts or Spotify and leave us a review. Thank you.